The presidential election of 1844 pitted two slaveholders of the Upper South who had formerly served as Speaker of the House of Representatives. But there ended the similarities between Henry Clay of Kentucky and James K. Polk of Tennessee. Their ambitions for the country were polar opposites. Clay, a Whig, favored an expansive central government but opposed the further physical expansion of the country, while Polk, a Democrat loyal to Andrew Jackson, ran under the banner of states' rights and the annexation of Texas. The results reflected how evenly divided the country was. Polk won the popular vote by fewer than 40,000 votes out of more than 2.6 million cast, and claimed 170 Electoral College votes to Clay's 105. This was even closer than it sounds because Polk was able to claim New York's 36 electors after eking out a 5,000 vote margin out of nearly 486,000 ballots cast in the Empire State. Making the loss even more brutal for Clay, he and Polk weren't the only two candidates on the ballot in New York, where James G. Birney, a former Alabama slaveholder turned Michigan-based abolitionist, had garnered nearly 16,000 votes for a tiny single-issue anti-slavery party, the Liberty Party, more than 3 times the margin of Polk's victory. The 1844 election post-mortems were still underway on December 6th when the Liberator, William Lloyd Garrison's abolitionist newspaper, ran a letter that Isaac Stearns had written to the Emancipator and Chronicle, a pro-Liberty Party newspaper, calling into question what he saw as their counterproductive editorial policies. I must acknowledge that I have been disappointed in the paper. I expected that it would have made the pure and holy anti-slavery cause the paramount principle of the paper. I was in hopes that you would have spread pure anti-slavery articles before your readers, as many of them needed to be taught the first principles of abolition. What a vast good you might have done if you had done so. Instead of that, your chief object, if I may judge by the paper, has been to vilify and abuse the Whig Party, especially the Whig candidate for the presidency, to cater for votes for Birney, Sewell, etc., when there was not the slightest prospect of their election. Now, I think the object of abolitionists to be to procure a pure, moral, anti-slavery sentiment among the people, to convince them of the evils of slavery. When the people become anti-slavery, the work will be done. They will choose anti-slavery rulers. Pure-minded abolitionists ought not to descend to the low and degraded arena of party politics, but abolitionize the masses belonging to both and all parties, not to cater for votes regardless of principle. I think the course the Emancipator and Chronicle have taken have done the anti-slavery cause an injury that cannot soon be repaired. If you had treated both the great political parties with strict impartiality according to their merits or demerits, if men high in office among the two parties had done anything in the anti-slavery cause to have given them due credit for the same, if one party had been more delinquent in the cause of human rights than the other to have laid it before your readers, then you would have commanded respect even from both parties. 2 or 3 years ago, prominent Whigs were heard to say that the Abolition Party were unquestionably designed to swallow up the other parties. They thought favorably of it and were almost persuaded to embrace it and expected they should ultimately do so. But alas, now how changed. They have seen their party attacked by the leaders of the Liberty Party with a violence unprecedented, while the so-called Democratic Party, who have sold themselves to slavery without even as great a consideration as Esau sold his birthright, have been suffered to escape comparatively unrebuked by the Morning Chronicle, Emancipator, and other Liberty Party papers. This course has had the effect to render the Liberty Party disreputable and its name odious to the whole Whig Party, while the other party are laughing in their sleeves to think that the partition wall between themselves and the Liberty Party is of such a frail nature that it will soon tumble down and both be one and all hail under the deceptive, hypocritical name of Democrat. It is said that the influence of the Liberty Party has caused those states to go for Polk, Dallas, and Texas, slavery and all. If so, they have defeated their own professed object and caused the enemies of freedom to rejoice and the friends of liberty to mourn. It is a curious circumstance that the Liberty Party, professing to be an anti-slavery party, should join heart and hand with the most rabid Southern slaveholders to put down the Whig Party, with such men as J.C. Calhoun, George McDuffie, Senator Walker, etc., etc. Yes, to join in with the party who rejected Van Buren and nominated James K. Polk, a Southern slaveholder, for the sole purpose of sustaining and advancing slavery by the annexation of Texas. It appears, although the Liberty Party, in conjunction with Southern slaveholders, have succeeded in putting down the Whig Party, yet you, as I understand by your paper published since the election, quote, expect to be occupied for a considerable time to come in battling the Whigs, unquote. It used to be thought the mark of a coward to knock a man down and then keep kicking him. Some think the Liberty Party will yet wake up and war against the Democratic, now the dominant party, but it will appear extremely awkward after standing shoulder to shoulder fighting the Whigs with such men as John C. Calhoun, Senator Walker, etc., etc., to turn right about face and fight them. During the late presidential canvass, the Emancipator has put more importance upon the circumstance that the Whig candidate fought a duel 30 years ago than the fact that the Democratic Party rejected Van Buren and nominated James K. Polk in obedience to Southern slaveholders for the express purpose of sustaining slavery. Hardly a paper has been published for 6 months back, but that the duel of Henry Clay has been trumpeted against the Whig Party, and also the circumstance that he did not prevent Graves killing Silly in a duel. In your paper, you say, Polk is indebted to New York for his election, and New York was carried by a small majority through the nomination of Mr. Wright for governor, a man of far greater personal weight than Mr. Polk and opposed annexation. In the same paper, you intimate that there were 20,000 Liberty Party votes in that state at the late election. Now, I have no doubt that 3/4 of those Liberty men were taken from the Whig Party. So the Liberty Party are responsible for the election of James K. Polk, either directly or indirectly. At their door must forever rest the consequences. While Polk arguably won because James Birney did not pull out of the presidential race, it also helped that someone else did withdraw. Outgoing President John Tyler, who had been elected as vice president to William Henry Harrison, who died a few weeks after taking office. Tyler was nominally a Whig, but had been exiled from the party after running his presidency more like a states' rights Democrat. He mounted what he knew to be a doomed third-party bid to pressure the Democrats into supporting Texas annexation, and they nominated Polk, who had been angling for the vice presidential nomination, after former President Martin Van Buren torpedoed his chances by coming out against annexation at the same time as Clay. After Polk declared his support for annexing Texas, Tyler withdrew and threw his support to the Tennessean known as Young Hickory. The annexation treaty failed to pass the Senate, but during the lame duck session after the election, a joint resolution offering annexation to Texas passed both chambers of Congress with support from Polk. As Clay had feared, the annexation led to the Mexican-American War, which resulted in Mexico's cession of the entire American Southwest. Polk also negotiated the Oregon Treaty in 1846, ending a long-standing boundary dispute with the British and securing what is now Oregon, Washington, and parts of Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana for the U.S. The country's territory grew by more than a third during his 4 years in office and extended coast to coast. It seems unlikely that all this would have happened if a few thousand more abolitionists in New York had supported the Whigs as the lesser of two evils. Clay, after all, had argued that we already had quite as much, if not more, territory than we could govern well. Of course, as Clay had also feared, all this expansion also led to the Civil War, but whether that outcome was inevitable is beyond the scope of this video. The truism that elections have consequences, including unintended ones, applies as much to 1844 as to 1860. As always, I've got additional context at my website. Click the link in the description below. And help this little channel keep growing by hitting that like button, subscribing, leaving a comment with your thoughts, and sharing with anyone who might be interested. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode.